Now let's talk about Pakistan, a country caught in a perpetual game of twister. Their problems are never ending, it seems. There's a caretaker government in place before the election takes place, possibly next year. And this caretaker government faces a new security nightmare. Terrorists with American guns. That's what the Pakistan government faces. The Prime Minister of Pakistan says there is a quote-unquote emerging challenge. And which group is he talking about? The Pakistani Taliban, better known as the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan or TTP. They are using American weapons and launching attacks on Pakistani soil. Where did they source American weaponry? From Afghanistan. The TTP is friends with the Taliban. And when they returned to power, the Taliban, when they returned to power, they found a huge cache of American weapons. The US forces had left these weapons behind and the stockpile was massive. It had night vision goggles, guns, ammunition, armored vehicles, even helicopters. The US left all of this behind. Do you know what was the total value of the stockpile? We have an estimate from April last year. The equipment is worth around $7 billion. Americans left weapons worth $7 billion for the Taliban. And how did the Taliban reach this stockpile? You see, the US had supplied these weapons to the Afghan government. They were supposed to be used by the Afghan army. But 2 years back, the government and the army fell. The Taliban took control of Kabul and they also seized this arsenal. And since then, these weapons have been showing up everywhere. Indian authorities found them too, in Jammu and Kashmir. We are still talking about American weapons found in the hands of terrorists in Kashmir, those who crossed over from Pakistan and tried to create trouble in India. The Taliban has been selling these weapons. Weapon bazaars have sprung up in Afghanistan. American assault weapons are being sold there. Like the M4 gun, it has a price tag, $2,400. These markets have hardware from other countries too, like Russia's AK-47 rifle. It's a relatively cheaper weapon than the American M4. The Russian gun sells for as little as $130. So the Taliban are now arms dealers, the TTP are their clients, and Pakistan is their target. The TTP is going after Pakistan's security forces, their soldiers and the police. And they're increasingly coming under attack. Terrorist attacks in Pakistan are rising. Last year, there was a 27% spike in the number of attacks. There were more than 200 terror attacks in Pakistan, and they killed more than 400 people. Pakistan has blamed the TTP for the surge, and the group agrees. They're taking credit, in fact, for all these attacks. Let me show you some pictures. They were released last year when the TTP attacked the Pakistani forces. They struck in 2 districts, South Waziristan and Bajaur. Apparently, the TTP used snipers. The shooters fired a dozen times. They used sophisticated equipment like thermal night vision and long-range rifles. Experts say Pakistani troops are struggling to repel these attacks. Last week, there were 2 more attacks. Again, the TTP was behind them, and the target was the Pakistani army. The first attack happened in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. It was a suicide bombing. A terrorist on a bike rammed into a military convoy. The bike had explosives. 9 Pakistani soldiers died in this attack. The second attack was near the Afghan border. 2 Pakistani soldiers were killed here. One of them was a major. The TTP struck again today, again in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. They attacked the Pakistan army near the border. Reports say the TTP has captured 2 security checkpoints. Now, this group is becoming a serious threat for the Pakistani army. In July, even the army chief acknowledged this. He said the TTP was using safe havens in Afghanistan. So indirectly, they're blaming the Taliban for their security issues. And the Taliban is a group created by Pakistan, nurtured, sustained, and brought back to power by the Pakistani regime. Now, the same Taliban is supporting the TTP. Pakistan wants Kabul to crack down. Instead, the Taliban is offering them advice. In July, Pakistan dispatched a special envoy to Kabul. It was a 3-day trip. The envoy had a simple assignment. He was supposed to meet Taliban leaders and deliver a stern message. Pakistan demanded, quote-unquote, decisive action against the TTP. Islamabad said, and I'm quoting again, its patience was wearing thin. And what was the Taliban's response? They met the envoy several times, but they refused to take action. Instead, they told Pakistan, and I'm quoting, to pursue the path of peace. The Taliban said Pakistan should talk to the TTP, talk about chickens coming home to roost. Pakistan propped up the Taliban to hurt India and others. They wanted a puppet regime in Kabul. Now that puppet has sprouted a mind of its own. It is offering diplomatic advice to Pakistan. Rawalpindi's grand strategy has been appended by homegrown terrorists. And now let's turn our focus to Africa. Burkina Faso in West Africa has erupted in clashes. This is a fight between the armed forces and militants. At least 53 troops have died. 17 were soldiers, 36 were volunteer fighters. They died in the northern part of the country, near the border with Mali. The army of Burkina Faso says it is conducting an operation there. It began on Monday, that operation. That's when the clashes also began. And now 53 troops are dead. It's not clear how many militants have died. This latest bloodbath is part of a bid to reconquer territory. You see, the northern part of Burkina Faso is not in the government's control. It has seen years of Islamic militancy. It is part of the so-called three borders, an area between Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger, hence three borders. For about 7 years, this entire area has been under attack. Terrorists have taken a hold of the region. These are groups affiliated with the Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. In this region, the Islamic State, or ISIS, is called the Islamic State of the Greater Sahel. ISGS, Islamic State of Greater Sahel. Now, for years, the ISGS and other groups have been trying to carve out territory for themselves here, leaving thousands of people dead in their wake. Since 2015, more than 16,000 people have been killed in Burkina Faso alone. 16,000 people. This includes civilians, soldiers, and the police. The terrorists also control about 40% of the country's territory. Obviously, this has fueled anger. It has resulted in coups. In fact, all these three countries, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, have seen a coup recently. The coup in Niger is the latest one. It took place in late July. Mali has seen 2 coups in the last 3 years, one in 2020 and the second one in 2021. And Burkina Faso saw 2 coups just last year, one in January and the second one in late September. And all the military leaders taking charge have said the same thing.
Le mercredi 26 juillet 2023,
on Wednesday, July 26th, security forces gathered to put an end to the regime of the Seventh Republic. Our action is motivated by the sole desire to preserve our beloved homeland in the face of the continuous deterioration of the security situation of our country.
Nos objectifs ne sont autres que de donner.
Our objectives are none other than to breathe new life into all our compatriots afflicted by this conflict. It is also to envisage indigenous development relying only on ourselves.
They say they took over to provide better security to their people. The military needed to be in charge to end the militancy. But has that really worked? We mentioned that 16,000 people have been killed in Burkina Faso since 2015. 5,000 were killed this year alone after the 2 coups. These latest clashes have seen the most casualties in months, but that does not mean smaller attacks have not taken place. Look at this, 60 people killed in late April, allegedly by men in military uniforms. Burkina Faso insisted that these were militants. Also in April, over 40 people died in a terror attack. 44 were killed earlier that month in another attack. March saw at least 2 major attacks, 14 people killed in one, at least 12 in the other. And in late February, an attack saw 51 soldiers from Burkina Faso killed. Now, this does not necessarily mean that Burkina Faso's new junta is incompetent. They have taken a hard line on insurgency. They're attacking areas under enemy control, and that's one of the reasons why there's been an uptick in casualties. But another reason is the instability brought by the coups. In Burkina Faso and Mali, studies show that militancy got a boost recently. The junta rule is directly to blame for this. Think about it. The days of uncertainty after a coup takes place. Tensions with neighboring countries following a coup, international sanctions, border closures, the threat of intervention. All these things are a boon for terror groups. The chaos allows them to expand their influence, and this has led to their proliferation in the Sahel region. When the military junta took over Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger, they promised to end militancy, to improve the security situation. So far, the opposite has happened. You can choose to see this as turbulence, the chaos that's part of a transition period. But the promise was an end to the violence, and so far, the juntas have failed to deliver. For our next story, let's stay on health. Growing old has many upsides, but it also comes with a number of health concerns. A big downside is high risk of developing cancer. Increasingly, age is a key risk factor. It has been well documented. But now a new study, the largest of its kind, puts more weight on this grim trend. It says cancer in people under the age of 50 is becoming more common, and how? Cancer cases in the under 50s increased by about 80%, 80% increase, and this happened in the last 3 decades, the world over. More than 1 million people below the age of 50 are dying of cancer every year, and this could increase by another 21% by 2030. What's behind these distressing numbers? Our next report tells you.
The world is contending with a disease that's growing as rapidly and silently as a tumor, and now it's preying on the young. We're talking about cancer. As people grow older, the risk of developing cancer increases. Advanced age has been considered a significant risk factor. But now, research says even the young aren't safe, and people under 50 are increasingly becoming susceptible to the deadly disease. According to a new study, the number of under 50 people being diagnosed with cancer has risen by 79% in the past 3 decades the world over. Cancer occurring in adults between 18 to 49 years is known as early onset cancer. In 1990, global cases of early onset cancer stood at 1.82 million. In 2019, they increased to 3.26 million. It's important to note one thing here. There has been a 40% rise in the total population in the past 3 decades. But even so, a rise of about 80% is alarming. And that's not all. Not only the cases, but the deaths are increasing too. Over 1 million under 50 people are dying of cancer annually. That's a 27% increase in 3 decades. Where were the highest death tolls seen? They were linked to breast, windpipe, lung, stomach, and bowel cancers. But while the young across the world are being diagnosed, like most diseases, it's not equally spread. The highest incidence rates were in North America, Oceania, and Western Europe. This study is the largest of its kind, but it isn't the first to show this trend. Cancer records from 44 countries agree with this. They found early onset cancer rising rapidly for 14 types of cancers. Windpipe and prostate cancers rose the fastest by about 2% for each. Breast cancer is the most common type among the under 50. There were 13.7 cases per 100,000 people in 2019, with an increase seen in many middle to high-income nations. The question is, what's behind this substantial rise in cases? Experts are still in the early stages of understanding the reasons. They say, much like in cancer cases in older people, genetic factors play a part here. But apart from that, they point to one factor: lifestyle choices. It's a broad issue. It includes poor diets, alcohol and tobacco use, and physical inactivity. Experts predict that ultra-processed foods are likely to blame as well. High blood sugar and excess weight also raises the risk of cancer. In fact, studies say that obesity increases the risk of 13 types of cancer. While this news is distressing, cancer still largely remains a disease of the old. Cancer in people under 50 may be increasing, but it's still fairly uncommon. 9 in 10 of all cancers affect people over 50. So while there's no reason to panic, both the young and the old can take steps to reduce the risk of cancer, like reducing smoking, maintaining a balanced diet, getting enough exercise, and protecting yourself while out in the sun. Studies are still unraveling the full scope of the problem, but they do say that no one is completely safe.
And now it's time for Vantage Shorts, images that tell the story. Have you ever abruptly walked out of a party or an event? If you have, then you and the President of the United States have something in common. Joe Biden has now sparked a controversy after he abruptly walked out of the Medal Honor ceremony. The Medal of Honor ceremony, in fact. No one knows why he did so, but the internet is calling it disrespectful. In Argentina, students use recycled lids to make a massive, messy mural. And Freddie Mercury's piano is up for auction for around $4 million. This was the piano on which he composed the 1975 hit song Bohemian Rhapsody. And finally, We're taking you back in history. On this day in 1975, 18-year-old Martina Navratilova sought political asylum in the US. The rising tennis star was defecting from communist Czechoslovakia. She became a US citizen in 1981 and went on to become one of the biggest tennis stars in history. We leave you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Saludamos con arte y sentimiento, obra realizada íntegramente, homenaje al más grande.
We've crossed 2 million subscribers on YouTube. This is arguably the fastest growing news platform, and we can't thank you enough for fueling this growth. All those of you who join us every day to watch this show and more, thank you. We launched Vantage 7 months ago, and these have been some very rewarding 7 months for us. So from the entire team here, heartfelt gratitude.